Greetings, Tony Mobley here, and I'm back with a new Conversations with Tony Mobley. And tonight, I have Mr. Guy Cochran. Guy Cochran, who is a video production professional and the DVE Store owner. And this is episode 33 of Conversations with Tony Mobley. Why are we here? We are here because life has provided me the opportunity to have real conversations with real people. First, I want to thank my guest last week, Mr. Bryant Chan, for his great conversation last week. And I want to thank the team behind Conversations with Tony Mobley. So we're here to have real conversations, and we hope to help others with these conversations. But I need your help. I want you to go to conversationswithtonymobley.com, and I want you to register to participate in the Mukana chat, which is a chat that will allow you to ask your questions, and those questions can be voted up and down. And if you like this conversation and past conversations, I ask that you like and subscribe. But wait a minute. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. So instead of general questions, you can ask questions of Mr. Guy Cochran in this way. What got you here? Where are you now? And what's next? So you can ask questions in those categories in Mukana. Thank you all so much for being here. If you like this content, set that bell for all of the notifications and be reminded of upcoming conversations. And so now we are going to talk to Mr. Guy Cochran. And I like to call Guy a video production scientist, because he is always trying new things and experimenting and pushing the envelope and trying to break things and see how things work. But before we get to all of that, the first question is, who is Guy Cochran? Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's pretty wild to think of how far that you've come. I mean, it's wild to just be sitting in this seat and see this evolution, and to see how great it looks behind the scenes. I wish all the viewers could see what I see as far as I'm looking into a teleprompter now and I'm seeing all these questions and everything. So the first one, who is Guy Cochran? Many things to many different people. I mean, I'm a dad, I'm a grandpa. I know some people won't believe that, but I have a couple grandchildren. At church, I'm a brother. At the office, I'm the boss. And then in office hours, I'm a panelist. I'm also a producer. So many things to many different people. And to my friends, I'm a friend. So I go by a couple different titles depending on where you know me from.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're going to get into those wonderful characteristics that you have exhibited, not just in the office hours community, but in general. What lessons have you learned from your parents that you're using today?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say from my mom, just, a lot of patience, because, we were just looking back at how crazy we were as kids. My brother and I gave my mom a run for it. So she had a lot of patience, but also there was discipline there. And some of those things I still tried to, as a parent myself, tried to exhibit those same qualities and features. So I'm half Asian, and so you could she's full Asian, so you could imagine there's a little bit of that comes with the culture of Asians. Is just that you don't mess around, and you always had to be aware of that go-go gadget slipper. That, whoosh, she could just it's like a boomerang. She'd do something wrong, man, that thing will come right at you.
Okay, and so the next question is, when did you know that this was the path for you?
It was probably when we got our first Mac. I think that the light bulb really went off when I started getting to use apps on a Macintosh. That really lit it up for me, especially Photoshop. I was lucky enough to get to work at a place that's called a service bureau, where you print large graphics. Back then it was Quark Express and PageMaker and things like that. And I got a chance to learn those apps in college. So we actually had dedicated classes, a whole semester on Quark Express, a whole semester on PageMaker. Back then it was Freehand, Illustrator, a couple other apps, Photoshop. And that's when I knew it was just something to do with graphics or just high quality visuals. I think that's when it really lit up.
How did you get started on this journey of embracing technology?
Oh, actually, I moved it. Dang, there was like a little thing that I had behind me that was a Christmas gift from 1985. It was this little robotic like arm called an Armatron that you can move around and pick things up. In that same year, I also got another electronics kit that some of you may remember these, where it had like a light and a 9-volt battery and a motor, and you could like hook different things up to these. I think they called them Heath kits or something like that, but this was a Radio Shack version. And I just loved to tinker with that thing and see what the different resistors and capacitors, and there was a piezo buzzer and all these different things did. And it just really, it was fun to tinker and see just exactly what things would do. So it came with directions, but I always liked to kind of go off the beaten path and see what things would do. I probably fried a couple things in it, but it was okay. That was it's all right to fail.
Oh, that's very cool that your parents embraced that for you and allowed you to start your journey on experimenting and breaking things and doing things. The next question is from Roscoe Jones of Berea, California. What is the most interesting place your career has taken you?
That's a great question from Roscoe, because this goes back 20 years to where I actually remember hanging out with Roscoe. So I used to work for a company called DVE Creators as a trainer. So I was teaching people video production. I was teaching lighting, editing, and delivery. Back then it was CD-ROM, how to put little videos on the internet, because back then, I mean, it was 56K dial-up DSL. And so we had to keep video very small. So I taught, back then it was called Media Cleaner. It later turned into Terran Cleaner, just called Cleaner. But I would go through all those different outputs, and where that led me to was Cape Town, South Africa. So there was a show called, ResFest. And ResFest was a show that went to Sao Paulo, a couple of other stops around the world, Tokyo, Sydney. I didn't get to go on all of them, but I did San Francisco and I did Cape Town, and they flew me out there, and it was a great time. Got to do Setengi was another show out there where I spoke and got to show people. Back then it was the Canon, I believe the Canon GL2 that I was showing. Yeah, this wasn't even high def. Yeah, this was standard definition days. So I was showing that, and got to teach people Final Cut, and it was from a cultural standpoint, it was fascinating. I mean, our host took us out to the wine country, Stellenbosch or something like that. Somebody could probably correct me on that one, but it was 20 years ago. But yeah, that's probably the most fascinating place that I got to go. There was a couple things lined up for Asia that never wound up going through, but yeah, I'd have to say that one was very cool.
Okay, very cool. When did you first work in video production?
I have to say I kind of dabbled with it at first. Professionally? Well, the way that I got into it was there was an editor in our building. So I was a digital imaging technician. I was scanning a lot of images and touching them up, and then printing them or putting them in layout. So I would image composition them. I would put them wherever they wanted the logo plus the text. These were for like Nordstrom, Starbucks, Microsoft, Nintendo. So I was doing big work for big companies, and I wasn't even 21 years old. But in that same building, there was an Avid editor with a $200,000 Avid, and he asked me to help him with some scans, and I scanned some images for him and gave them to him. And then he had just gotten Adobe After Effects. I think it was version 2 or 3. And this is back in the days where you had to have a hardware dongle. So it was like a ADB serial port thing. You had to stick it in your keyboard to run the app. Otherwise it wouldn't work. So he gave me the ADB dongle and the CDs, and I went ahead and, or it might have even been disc. No, we had CD-ROMs. Man, I'm starting to feel really old. Was it floppy disk? Yeah, it's probably like 20 floppy disks. I'm going to stick them all in. But yeah, I learned that app pretty quick and started making animations. And he started teaching me how to drop them into the Avid. And pretty soon, he was just like, yeah, I'd bill those out at $120 an hour. And here I was, not even 20 years old, in 1997, making $120 an hour. It was really good money. So I decided to start freelancing. And so wound up getting on a couple of different shows and helping out. In fact, there is a picture right there that just popped up. So that was a Media 100. That was exactly around those times, because that's After Effects on the screen. That was for a different client. But yeah, there's beta decks underneath there and VHSs. We did a lot of VHS. In fact, I did a lot of VHS, like hundreds and hundreds of VHSs that we would crank out. So we would have a beta master and then go out to VHS. But yeah, in that picture, we had a Media 100 with some drives that cost a 9 gig drive back then. A RAID was $5,000. I mean, it was crazy money for that setup right there. Was like $30,000, $40,000. And now what you can get for that same amount is incredible. I mean, kids these days, they just have it. They have it so easy with the quality that you can get from, a Blackmagic camera and a nice MacBook or a Mac Mini M1 for $600. They just don't realize how easy it is. I mean, and back then, you really had to either buy a system that was like the Media 100 that was just turnkey, that had all the kinks worked out, or you had to be prepared to like die on the sword, because Adobe Premiere was just a train wreck, and so was almost everything else at that time. So professionals using professional tools like the Avid and the Media 100 had it easy, but for other people that were getting into it, it was a painful experience. There's many nights that I remember staying awake trying to let something render and hoping that it would go out okay, because it was like, deadlines fast approaching, got to get it to the dub house. And because back then we didn't go to the web, we went to the dub house, and if you messed up, you'd have hundreds of VHS, plastic things that you had to throw in the landfill. So it's a different world back then. So yeah, late 90s was when I really got into video production.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Guy. We have a question from Kevin Michael Reed of Dublin, Ireland. What are you excited about in video production in the next year? Example, next year, couple of years, or decade?
The next year, man, I'm really excited about the cloud and what we're doing with AWS. I mean, even this show right now, this is going up to AWS, and then it goes out from there to YouTube. And so we're starting to see a little bit of it to where people are grasping it. But there's just so many more people that if they knew the power of this and the flexibility and how stable it is, because that's the big thing. You're renting a clean computer up in the cloud. It doesn't have a bunch of apps unless you install them on there. And then it's super cheap. I mean, this machine's probably $1.25. This might be a G4DN 8X. That might be a little over $2 an hour to run. And that's on demand, so you can turn it on and turn it off. So I think letting more and more people see what cloud does, because like this machine, if we were to run a speed test on it, it'd be about 3,000 megabits per second up and down. So if you think about somehow getting video up and then recording it and being able to kick it back out to somewhere very quickly at 3,000 megabits a second, it's almost like it's there locally. I mean, you're able to move at speeds that you never were before, because most people's house is only going to be like 100 megabit. So to be able to toss things around, even though you're just you're using what we call an RDP app. You're using something like Parsec or TeamViewer or Microsoft RDP to control that computer up there. And so it's like you're there, and especially with Parsec and another one called Nice DCV. When you're using those, it feels like when you hit play on a video, there's like hardly any lag. I mean, it's imperceptible lag. So you could run other apps like DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere, Adobe Photoshop. So again, you don't have to, I think a lot of people just need to realize is that you don't have to pull all the files down. You can copy them into the cloud drive, or your AWS bucket, your S3 bucket, or your Google Drive. And since Google's on the same backbone, you can just copy stuff over and it's lightning quick. And then you can cut your show and kick it back out, and it's so much faster. I think there's probably thousands of people across the world right now that are doing it the hard way, where they're like waiting for stuff to download, editing it, and then pushing it back up when they could have just did it in the cloud, and it would have been so much faster. And even if it was $2 an hour, $2 for an 8-hour day, I mean, $16 a day, it's not that bad compared to 3 days, of somebody having to up and download stuff and wait. The features, it's bright.
Yeah, I'm going to say, Guy, that I understood most of what you said. But I'm going to say that there are probably people who are listening and watching that did not get a lot of it. So if you could just, like, some of the terms that you use in terms of the speed. Can you break that down a little bit further?
Yeah, so typically when you get a DSL line, you're dealing with a pretty low number. Like typically, probably in the rural areas, we're not even seeing 5 megabit up. So that is like barely enough upload speed to handle a Zoom call. It would take you, I don't have any numbers in front of me, but it would take a long time to take a file that you shot on even your iPhone, like a video, and to transfer it up. So when you're dealing with the cloud, you can get different instances at different sizes. So some of them are down to a couple cents. Like I was looking at some that were actually there's even some that are free, completely free. Computers that you can use up in the cloud for free. They're called T2 micros, but they're super wimpy, and those machines, they limit the bandwidth. So you actually pay, there's different scales that escalate up as to how much bandwidth that you have to utilize. So your up and down speeds get faster and faster. The highest end one that I've seen is what they call a bare metal, which is 10,000 megabits per second. So the machine is not only a fast machine, but they give you a bigger access point. Your Ethernet connection is actually given, because they could limit it in the switch and in the back end. They could limit it as to how much up and down that you get. So it's an exciting place to be. I mean, if you're handling big files, it just makes life easier, because again, going back to that rural example, you can be on a farm in the middle of nowhere, even on cellular, and you can be controlling this powerful machine even from an older computer. So you rent the older computer, or you use the older computer to control the fast computer. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. So, like in my case, when I first joined office hours, I had a very sort of wimpy MacBook Pro that was very aged. And one of the things that I was encouraged to do was to get the ATEM Mini to decrease the stress that the old MacBook had in terms of being able to utilize some of the aspects of the ATEM Mini to be able to actually broadcast if needed. So that was a hardware solution. But what you're talking about is the cloud solution, and it is absolutely amazing. And so I hope those who are listening are very interested in what you just shared, and then we'll look into the cloud solution, because it seems to be a way that will help those who may not have the best hardware be able to be relatively competitive with whatever they're trying to do in video production by looking at I'm not saying it's the way to go, but a way to go. So thank you, Guy, for sharing that.
Yeah, certainly. And a lot of this stems from just at the beginning of the pandemic, Jeff Keithley came on and did a demo of Sienna, which is a really pricey piece of software that works in the cloud. And when he showed an interface that looked like an ATEM, and I saw the little familiar buttons pop up, and I was like, it's a switcher in the cloud? Like, what? I mean, if I could have fallen out of my chair, I would have fallen out of my chair, because it really just hit me. I mean, the hairs on my arms stood up. It was at that point that I saw the future. It was like, this is where it's going. Just people, once they figure out how to get the video up, which in this case we're using Video Ninja, but you can also use Zoom as a contribution. We have boxes. I have one over here that's an SRT box. So there's many ways to get your video up. So a lot of people are like, I get the idea, but how do you get the video in? And so there's different boxes. So even though an 810 Mini, actually an 810 Mini with OBS, you can use OBS as an SRT sender on a Mac or PC, and you can send up your video that way. So it's interesting to think that, as this catches on and it gets simpler and simpler. Right now there's even an app on the iPhone called Lyrics Broadcaster that if you put that app on your phone and I put a QR code in front of you and you scan it, it immediately starts sending your video up to the cloud, like that fast. It's that simple.
Oh, wow.
So one app, one scan of a QR code, and the video is going up. Actually, you do have to push the little red start button. So three steps. But yeah, I mean, it's literally that simple.
Can you spell that, please, for us?
Lyrics, I believe it's Larix, Lyrics Broadcaster.
Okay, and I'm hoping that those in our YouTube audience can put the link in the YouTube so that those who are listening will be able to access that link.
Yeah, and one of the fun things that I'll do every once in a while is there's an SRT streaming group on Facebook that I'll put a 9-up box, kind of like the Brady Bunch where you get the 9 squares, and then I'll put the QR codes in each box, and then anybody can test out their phone and see what it looks like and send it up, and I'll bring it into a composite, this Brady Bunch look, and I'll bring it full screen, then make it small and let everybody see what their video looks like so they can see the quality and see that it's working. Because a lot of people don't want to, get up into the cloud, but it fascinates them to be like, oh yeah, I can do this part. I can install an app and I can scan a QR code and I can send video. And then to see that it's coming back down to them composited, then they're like, whoa, and it looks really good too. That's the other part, is the quality and the fidelity of the video is just getting better and better. I mean, I've ramped it all the way up to 4K. I want to say over 10 megabit, if I remember right. And the quality is just phenomenal for a phone. Phone doing 4K, it's bananas.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so we have another question, and let's see, can you talk about your work with software? And little birdie told me that you at some point were doing instruction in Final Cut Pro. Yeah,
so in the late 90s, there was a company, MSNBC, which I guess is still around, but it was back then it was MSNBC Interactive, and they were interested in Final Cut. So I was already starting to use it in our productions as we switched over from Premiere. The two were kind of going neck and neck. This is as DV was hitting the scene. And so I started teaching a couple people and showing it at like this news organization and just giving demos around town, around the Seattle area. And then there was another company in LA called DVE Creators that got wind of what I was doing, and they said, fly on down and let's meet up and chat. And so I came down there with my PowerBook, I believe it was a G3, and I had a bunch of demo stuff on there, and I showed them what I was doing, and they offered me a job. So next thing I know, I was flying all over the country. In that time, I taught Final Cut in every major city in the United States, across Mexico, Canada, and then wound up in South Africa, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, I became even Sky, who's often on the panel. I taught him way back then. Orlando Luna, who works for Apple, I believe he's a master trainer, and I taught him Final Cut. So it's kind of weird to look back at a lot of these folks that. And then side by side, I worked with Steve Martin. He was my coworker, so we're both team members on instructors for DVE Creators. So, and then we developed some CDs. We had a tutorial CD-ROM for Final Cut, and then there was one for LiveType that I made. So That was one product that I was involved with. Was the lifetime tutorial. That was almost all the mouse movements. Me. I know you don't see my face on it, but that's my cursor moving.
Very cool. Very cool. Wow. Wow. That's amazing that you had all those connections and you had the opportunity to travel the United States and teach Final Cut Pro. But for those who may not know, and I'm sure it's in this audience is probably very few, just share with us what Final Cut Pro is.
So Final Cut Pro is what we call a non-linear editing, so an editor. So back in the early days, we had linear editing, which was like VHS to VHS. We had tape, which was linear. And so non-linear is when we switched to digital, essentially. So back in the early days, we had like capture cards, and we were capturing the analog tape into a digital format. Now we're pretty much shooting straight digital. Like when I pull out my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera and put a SSD drive on it, it's just going to a file. So nonlinear editors are just ways of editing video that's not having to be tape to tape or film like we had to splice it with razor blades and put everything back together again. So it's a way of editing digitally.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We have a question from Joe Floyd of Gainesville, Florida. When are we getting a new mid-tier switcher option from Blackmagic?
Oh, Joe, even if I knew, I couldn't tell you. But so a lot of people may not know. So DVE Store, the company that I work with, is a Blackmagic reseller, and we sell a lot of ATEM minis. So those are the small $295 switchers, which allow 4 HDMI cameras or computers or any type of HDMI input to come in. And then you can switch, and you can even do green screen. So lots of power in those little switchers. But we do need something with SDI. We do need something that's 4K. So if I was to guess, that's where we're headed next. Is we're going to get something in the mid tier. So the one that's sitting on my desk right here is about $1,295. So I'd say that there's something in between. He's right. There is a need for something that's 4K, that's SDI. So I'm guessing that's where, and there might even be a crossbreed, something, because we have all these cameras that, like the Blackmagic Pockets, they're all HDMI based. And you could convert them, of course, with little $50 converters, but I still think we need something that's halfway in between, like in the $1,500, $1,600 range that does HDMI and SDI. And maybe one day we'll see NDI, but I doubt it.
So can you real quickly just explain the difference between HDMI and SDI?
Sure. Yeah, it's just a connector. So the HDMI connector is what you'd see on a lot of the consumer grade cameras and televisions and Blu-ray players, and it's a non-locking connector. So professionals like the stability of a locking connector, and SDI has a way that you push the connector on and you twist it and it locks. And it also runs way further. So HDMI, typically people try to keep it under 25 feet unless you go to a fiber type cable. SDI, you can run 300 feet and it's very robust. I mean, you can run over the cables and they still work. And so it's just been a staple in the industry for years now. And it'll also do 4K, no problem. I guess same thing with HDMI. It'll actually go all the way up to 8K. So we'll see how that all unfolds as well. Yeah, they're both capable of going all the way up to 8K. So we'll see how all this shapes up.
Okay. Can you tell us how the DVE store got started?
The DVE store got started from all those people that I taught in all those cities. They kept asking, well, where do I buy that hard drive? Where do I buy that Tiffin filter? Where do I buy that low light kit? And so eventually we put a couple items on the DV Creators website. And then this was around 2003. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And then I we were about ready to have Maddie, she's now 18. So wow, this is a long time ago. And I wanted to move back up here to be with my daughter. So I tried to figure out what I could do besides just travel around. I wanted to be home more. And so we came up with this idea. Josh Melliker is his name, the owner of DVE Creators. We came up with this idea to put a couple things on the website and see how it goes. And we had a very small number to start out with as a goal. And I mean, we blew past it pretty quick. And then it just became a matter of reaching out and forming relationships with all the different manufacturers. We got Sennheiser. We started to get brands like Rode and eventually ones like Blackmagic. And we actually were even an Apple computer dealer there for a while until Apple started the stores. But yeah, we were selling computers and Final Cut itself. And so we started in a little tiny office in Mukilteo, Washington that was about maybe not even 100 square feet in the back office of a friend's place. You know, it's so weird to think that, you know, it's like, hey, can I borrow that back office? You know, I'm just going to do a little work back there. And then it turns into what you see in this picture today is a city block long, 19,000 square feet. It's a monster building. I mean, it's huge. We don't take up the entire building. We take up a fourth of it. So it's 80,000 square feet in all. But we have a warehouse with a loading dock. We started importing a lot of things from China, mostly ring lights. So that was a big part of our success story was ring lights got huge thanks to an influencer that we met up with locally here in Marysville. And that really took the company to a whole nother level. So DVE Creators helped start the company, but it wasn't until we hit about 2012, 2013, I believe it was, when we started selling ring lights. And I mean, it just, talk about a wild ride. I mean, it was a wild, wild ride to bring a product in from China. We actually did all the packaging ourselves. We designed the boxes and things like that. And so you'll see in these pictures, I mean, that is a lot. That's like a whole shipping container. We would bring in a whole shipping containers of ring lights. I mean, thousands upon thousands of lights. You can see in these shots here. And we would package them up ourselves in our facility and then ship them out. And so that was all thanks to one influencer. I still hang out with them, Judy and Benji of It's Judy's Life. She was a makeup beauty blogger that one video that I did with her got over 400,000 views when we talked about the ring lights. So, and she has like 3 million followers. So it was really up to them to, or thanks to them that thing really took off. I mean, because she knew Michelle Phan, and at the time they were the big influencers in that space. YouTube calls her OG. It's funny she's the original daily vlogger. Yeah, so that's how we took off.
Very cool, very cool. David Brady is in, and he has a question. He says, what was the biggest challenge over the past 2 years as it relates to retail and supply chain struggles?
I'd have to say a lot of it was with Blackmagic when like the A10 minis came out, and just in office hours alone, we had a surge of demand, and I felt bad that I couldn't get, and it's not any fault of my own, you know, it's just these guys couldn't put these things together fast enough, get the chips fast enough. There was a shortage in planes. And so typically what would happen is you could load in the belly of an aircraft freight that hung out with the along for the ride with the passenger planes coming in. And so now you're not seeing too many passenger planes coming from places like Australia. So you're not getting cheap freight anymore. It's very expensive. So some of the challenges are not only increased cost of those, but the margins just start to crumble, because now all of a sudden you're having to pay more and you're having to get in line. So the delays that we're seeing, some things like sound devices, mixed pre-3s, we're being told we might not even see them this year. So it's very strange. And that's not just because of the pandemic. That was pre-pandemic. There was a fire, or at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a fire, the AKM fire that destroyed one of the chip making factories. And this doesn't just touch sound devices. It was across the board. Behringer, Yamaha, all these guys use these chips. And so a lot of things just got pushed to the side. And so we're seeing it with things like cars and other things that need chips as well. So it's not just us. So I can't just sit here and say, woe is me, because I'm seeing it just in the car lot when I drive by, and it used to be completely full. And now there's like 20 cars, and I'm like, wow, that's got to be rough, because for those guys, they got big glass showrooms with hundreds of employees, and so we're scooting by. It's tough, but it's doable. It's just I'd rather have a free flow of goods like we had before, and have all the sound devices, mixed pre's to sell everybody that wants them. Because there's certain things. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a wonderful boon because we had PTZ cameras and all kinds of capture cards that we were able to really just dominate because we had so much inventory. I carry 7 figures of inventory on hand. And so at the beginning, the surge, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but everybody wanted a capture card, and there was none to be found. And I was like, I got a few. We had hundreds. So, it was a good time at the beginning.
Yeah. We have another question. We have a question from Douglas Carmichael. Have you ever thought of expanding your business into production and rehearsal facilities for clients?
That's a great question, Douglas. We have a pretty large warehouse that we call it the lower warehouse that would actually work for this. In fact, Sir Mix-a-Lot's a friend of mine, and I actually have his LED wall there right now. And so we thought about putting something there for other people to utilize because this wall is like 20 feet long and needs a lot of power. So we started to get everything in place. We had an electrician run the power. And so what I wanted to see, though, was what you see in Mandalorian, which, if those of you haven't seen, it's a very tight. So these LED walls go by nanometer pixels. And so they need to be really tight for the image to appear realistic. And the wall that Mix has is an older one, so it was like a 3 mil, and so it looked very chunky. It looked like a jumbotron, so it's like not even worth trying to do the kind of production that I want to do. But that's one of the things in the future. If not us, we're north of Seattle, and so I know in the Seattle area they call them XR stages. You're going to see more of these because the people that have them in LA and some of the other bigger cities are booking them out completely solid because everybody wants to get into this new production with Unreal Engine, and where you're moving cameras and it's tracking the data and it's able to change the lighting. So even the ceiling can be clouds and things like that make realistic looking shadows on things like glass on a car. So you could change the lighting of the subject just by changing the ceiling. So it's fascinating. And we're talking millions of dollars to do this. So it's probably not something that we're going to get into just because I'd rather let other people field it out and see how it works first. I don't want to invest in something and then something else comes out and be stuck with $1 million worth of stuff that's not utilized. But I'm fascinated by the technology, but at the moment, it's not something that we're going to open up, especially with the pandemic doing what it's doing. I have no interest in having people on site. I'd rather or if we do it, I'd rather have a couple people crewing, and then it goes out virtually. So that would be amazing if we could have a studio where people can come in and perform, and it's just going out for a digital first type event.
Very cool. Very cool. Clylock Lopez Waterman, Astoria, New York. How do you balance so much passion for the field, which you clearly have so much of, with the more practical needs of being a business owner?
Wow, great question, Talak. It's really the team. I mean, I got to hand it to the folks that are smarter than me in logistics and come from other factory type atmospheres. I've got a couple managers that really have more experience than me, and so I let them do what they do best. It's kind of an aha moment when you're a small business evolving and you start to give up some of these duties. I mean, you want to have your hand in some things. You want to keep an eye on them, but you really want to let people have free reign and run the show. You don't want to micromanage everything. I mean, I have no interest in some of the reports that are run. It's so much detail. And so I've learned that there's creative people and there's analytical people. So the left brain, right brain people. And so having a passion for just all things video, I know that's where my A game shines, and that my A game's not in booking, freight from China. It's just doing the paperwork and talking to people in China is not my thing. And especially since the time difference is so odd, I've got other people, let them do it. So yeah, let other people run and do their thing.
Wow, thank you, Talak,
Oh, and I'm
for that
seeing
question.
I was seeing a picture that was up there. If you want to pull that back up, I can tell you the story behind that one. That one is a group of local kids. So I got a call one time asking at the food bank if I could help with a video. So I did the video for the food bank and they loved it. And then somebody else asked them if they knew anybody that did video production to help these kids. And so I came in, and this was when the Ursa the first Ursa came out, and it was like this huge, massive camera. And I brought it and we shot a couple things and let them play with the footage and edit it. And they had big dreams of it being on Ellen. The final piece didn't wind up going on Ellen, but it was just fascinating to see their eyes light up. And there's been a couple incidents like this where people have come back later on, years later, and said like, hey, I'm in the film industry now, or I'm working for Sony, or I'm a news director. Like, thank you for, your inspiration back then. And so that's another reason when Talal asked what keeps me going, why am I so passionate about this? Because I love seeing people like you, Tony, evolve. Like, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but it was me who came up with the idea of like, hey, you should have your own show, Tony. You should start doing things. And the next thing you know, here we are.
Absolutely. It would, yes. And you gave me all the tools and you said, be a broadcaster. Thank you, Guy, for that.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Douglas, and he says, coming from a creative background, was it a struggle learning business skills? Yeah,
certainly. In fact, it was at my local college where I really started to get some coaching. There was something called the Small Business Accelerator, and it was a group of businesses that were in the $1 million range, $1 million plus range. And then you would just go there and you would have a coach that would work with you one-on-one after class, and you would get your financials broken apart to see, what your top line was, what your bottom line was, and then more importantly, what were the industry percentages and where you should be. Like, are you paying too much for business and occupancy? Is your building oversized? Are you spending too much on advertising? So getting to peer into these numbers and have them make sense by somebody who's done it before and could simplify it was just it was such a huge boon to get that kind of clarification, because I was kind of flying blind. And again, a lot of us are creatives, and so we missed that right brain. In fact, it was or left brain. We missed that want to do what I call the dirty work. So I used to have to come in on Saturdays or Sundays on the weekend to catch up with accounting when I first started, because I didn't have anybody. So I had to come in and do it, and it was painful. But then I would later learn through some kind of psychology class or somewhere, I learned that there's people that love numbers and that they want to do that, and that you're actually taking a job away from them if you don't let them do it. And so that's when the aha moment really hit, was just like, dude, do what you do. Let these other people jam on what they do. And as a team, you can go further because they actually have passion for what they want to do. So, yeah. Local community college.
Wow. And so we have a question from the DC Metro, Mr. Greg Gibson from Centerville. What do you see as the biggest challenge for media producers as we start to come out of the pandemic and the Zoom age?
I think that we're going to see a lot of people that realize that traveling is not as much fun. And so for some people, they will want to get back on the road. But I think for other people that go to like New York from the West Coast and fly over and then have to head into a meeting the next day, and they're trying to recover from being fatigued, they're going to be like, man, I could have done that as Zoom. So I think we're going to have people that go back and do some stuff, but then they're going to realize that they could have produced it for cheaper or faster or with less fatigue, or did more gigs that year. And so I think we're going to see just more and more people that come to this realization that virtual is here to stay. Like, especially with the quality of Zoom, if you can get the 1080p accounts, it looks really darn good, and everybody knows how to use it. So it's super simple. I mean, ideally we start to get people to where they want to buy the tools that I sell, things like a Brio camera and a Hi-O mic, things, or even a Shure SM 7B or something like that, that is a good mic that makes some sound and look, and a light. So there's really three things that you need to do to make it just high quality. And so I think that we're going to see more and more people come
share
to
those three things again, Guy, just in case somebody missed it.
Yeah, a Brio camera to start, a high quality webcam. And then after that, you might even step into a DSLR, a mirrorless type camera with an HDMI capture card. And that's what I'm using here. And I think that's what are you using, Tony? What camera are you using?
I'm using a 10s Max iPhone.
Oh, that's right. You're using an iPhone.
With Filmic Pro, and that's going into my ATEM.
Yeah, that's a great combo too. I mean, if you could find, if you're not using your phone, I mean, so you still have a separate phone that you use for daily carrier, and that's just a permanent fixture. Yeah, that's really the way to go.
This was my son's old phone, and it stopped connecting. And so Talak sent me a video on how to service old phones. And sure enough, there was a piece of glass that was actually in his phone in the connector. And so when I got it out, he wanted a new phone anyway, but
it was just an excuse. It was all ploy.
Right,
it was all...
right. So I was able to use, I've been able to use it as my main camera. So it works. And
it looks darn good. It looks amazingly crisp.
I have it in the back of my teleprompter. It's in the back of the teleprompter, and I'm looking at you through the teleprompter, and it's doing a good job.
I wonder what the eBay price. I mean, compared, if people can pick those up, I mean, that's a great suggestion for folks. If you could find an iPhone 10 for, I'd probably guess they're like what, $200-$300. Because I know I have an 11 that I just put up for sale, I think for $500. So, and then the new one, man, the camera on that and the cinematic mode. I don't know if you've seen the new one, but something else.
Well, that's what my son got. He got a new one.
Did he? Oh man, it's really good. So a good camera, good lighting, and right now you're seeing me on a really expensive light. This is an aperture light with a big softbox and a big. Actually, let me see if I could cut. I could probably cut to that if you guys want to see kind of the behind the scenes setup. Let's go cut. So yeah, they have that big old setup up there with that huge softbox and an egg crate. So that's when you start to get, super pro. You start to get into the soft boxes with the egg crates and RGBW lights and things like that. So camera, light, and then a good mic. This is a Rode Broadcaster. And then it goes into a high quality capture device, which I've talked about a little bit earlier, the Sound Devices Mix Pre series. So the 3 you can't get right now because it's that shortage that we talked about, but the 6 is still available, the 10's available, and so those are super high quality preamps that allow you to go XLR, which is the connector of a lot of the pro mics, to USB to go into the computer. So those 3 things: good camera, good light, good mic, and then good internet be the 4th one.
Very cool. I hope you guys are listening. The next question is, how has the world changed since COVID-19 for you and your company? I'd
say a lot of us are working from home, so I haven't been going to the office as much. I've mostly been working from home. We've also instituted a work from home series where we roll people that ship out so that in case there is an exposure, like last week we had an exposure and we're glad that we did, because if that person would have got other people, we still could have shipped, because it's important that we ship because we have metrics. Not only do we sell through our website, we also sell through Amazon and eBay, and if you don't ship people stuff, they tend to get upset. So we try to make it so that no matter what, we're gonna make sure that packages go out the door. So that, and then we got our Zoom account. We actually wound up getting an enterprise account, which is 100 seats. So we have a ton of flexibility there. And we have Zoom webinars, Zoom events, and then we actually have Zoom phones as well. So during the pandemic, they asked us a couple times if we'd switch. And at first I didn't see a reason, but now I get it, because now we're unified with chat. So before we're using Skype, and now we're using Zoom chat. So it's one app, and we're able to escalate a phone call into a video call if we want. It's a really sweet setup. So not only that, I'd say, one of the big things that we were already doing was we invested in something called NetSuite, which is our financing and our what we call ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning software. It's in the cloud, and we invested in that in 2014. So had we not done that, we would have been having to VPN and having to do a lot of networking type stuff, but NetSuite just runs in the browser and it's super powerful. So I was glad that we embraced the cloud way early, because some of our partners that we work with just last year switched to NetSuite. And to do NetSuite, it's about a 6 to 9 month install. So it's not just like you buy the software and you install it. You gotta do a lot of customization and to get it up and running. So I was so happy that we were able to have people working from home, and they would just open up a browser and they could check inventory levels, they could check sales reports, they could run the sales reports. And even if they were on a Chromebook, when they hit run report, it's actually utilizing many servers back at Oracle bought NetSuite, and it's able to run those reports in seconds, which is it's fascinating knowing that before you would hit run report even on a fast machine and it would take 10 to 15 minutes, and now it's seconds. So we're really happy that the world's evolved and the cloud's becoming more a thing for small business and large business. I mean, Oracle, and it's the biggest stuff in the world,
Very cool. Let's talk about your generosity to the office hours community. And I know that your generosity is beyond just them. I know you're doing a lot of work with your church, and let me do this. Let me talk about your generosity to me. So let me talk a little bit about that. So I want to say thank you so much for, as you said, you were one of the people who said to me, you need to have your own conversation. And so not only did you suggest it, you provided a means for me to get started doing that. So I want to say thank you so much for that. I also know that you have supported other shows, other activities for people to share video production and any other type of show that they might want to do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I love lifting people up. I believe in karma. I think it all circles around. You help somebody, and eventually, if not them, I mean, one of the sayings, I don't remember exactly how it goes, but helping somebody that can't do anything for you is one of the best things that you can do. I mean, it's a feel-good thing that there's no expectation of return. If somebody else helps me out in some other way, great, and that's what I believe, is that it'll circle around. So I like to do things just because it makes me feel good. And at the end of the day, what are we here for? Are we here just to make a buck, or are we here to actually lift your fellow man? And so I believe in lifting my fellow man. It's what makes a lot of this stuff worth it. A lot of the late nights, I don't miss flying around the country anymore, but when I did, I mean, it was trading time for $1. And now I love being able to show people how to do things that either save them time or save them money, or show them how hard it used to be so that they realize how great it is now. But yeah, giving people a platform to stand on, especially since I'm at a level where it doesn't cost me as much as it would to somebody else, because my 1,000 or my 100 unit Zoom Enterprise account, we're able to get Zoom Webinar at such a significant discount. And so to me, to be able to be like, hey, Tony, you want to use one of my seats? It's no problem, because I see the potential, and I know that it helps lift you up, and not just you, but Victor, AV Tech Talks, Zoom Test Kitchen, all those are riding on there's more. There's some people in the Philippines. There's people around that they're doing shows with our account, and it's cool, for free. I mean, there's no. I'd appreciate it if they buy when they need video production equipment. They help, and in that regard, it circles around. Or that other people that have big, some people have like big universities or big companies, and they see what I'm doing and they're just like, hey, I'd rather give that to Guy than to somebody else, just because he helps in the community. So again, I think it all circles around eventually, and I hope that it does.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Guy, for being who you are, your authentic self, and what you've done in terms of the community, in terms of your generosity, is absolutely amazing. So thank you again for that. We have another question from Greg Gibson. And he says, what do you see as the greatest benefit you receive from your near daily participation on office hours?
That's a great question, Greg. I mean, seeing again people like you grow. So Greg's a great example of somebody who made a stunning transformation from being a still photographer to being an online video producer. And so I love hearing and seeing these scenarios where somebody that was not quite hurting, but that was able to transform from something that was eroding. There was no more income stream coming in and taking it upon themselves to learn. And so office hours is a place where creative people can learn more, and it's there if you want to gobble up the information. If not, then it's maybe you're more fascinated by trucks or some other gardening or birding or whatever. But even all that, there's still a video component there coming soon to Office Hours 3.0 near you. No, but seriously, I love seeing people like Jonas is another person that I've just watched evolve into just a wonderful young man. I mean, he was before, but he's really come out of his shell and he's doing tremendous things. I have high hopes for Lois's birding show that it actually takes off. And that's what really gets me pumping, is when I see people successful. I don't mean like, big screen successful, but just knowing that they're happy, they're getting higher quality and more reach because of our efforts.
Very cool. Can you summarize your use of different technologies for office hour experiences?
Different technology. Can you expand on that or reword that one?
So, Conversation with Tony Mobley is using Video Ninja. There are the Belfast methods, the two different Belfast methods, and the cooking show. And you kind of have your hands in a lot of those different ways of doing things. So I just wanted, if you just wanted to just talk about your perspective.
Yeah, even out of my son's local high school sports being streamed, I'm always looking, because I hear it from their customer. It's funny that I live a couple hundred feet away from the high school, and they have a video production facility. And it's interesting just to see how one school may or may not have more money than another school and what tools that they have access to. So they're just using iPads, and they're using not Cinemaker, Teradek Air. And so to see them, it's like, I don't need to interrupt. Like they're doing great. Like the show is going out, it's live, it looks okay. But I did talk with the teacher and be like, hey, the football players are like little dots because it's such a wide, the zoom on a iPad, even the Pro isn't very much of a reach. They need, a camera with a real lens. And so eventually they're going to get into that. But I love seeing the evolution of, Mount Vernon High School has, the players, you could see the sweat on their brow from that's just a different shot. And then they're pulling these things up and they're comparing the Facebook feeds on each school and saying, hey, I need this. So another school that's local, Oak Harbor, we outfitted them with a full 4K. So when the earlier question we were talking about, Joe Floyd was asking about the switchers. We actually put the ATEM Television Studio Pro 4K in their facility, and they're capable of doing full-on 4K with a Wowza Clearcaster. So they're one of those schools that did get, that was a $28,000 order. They did get all the, bond money or whatever it was to go ahead and produce. And yeah, the clarity is there. So I love seeing not just them, but in the office hours world, the Belfast method blows my mind. One, not just because of the hardware, it's more of what's going on behind the scenes, which is fascinating with what they're doing with the software. So Manolo's using something called Universe to develop individual buttons that you can control. So Universe allows you to control lighting. It can control cameras. I've programmed it to start and stop vMix live streams and start record, start stream. So I've gotten into it myself. And so that's another great learning from office hours is I would have never known about Universe. And now I'm dabbling in it. I'm not a pro, but the idea that I'm envisioning is that we'll have a showroom, a virtual showroom where people can turn on lights, pan and tilt cameras. So we have a mannequin. We've already been doing this so that people can already do this. It's just, I want it to be secure and not just in Zoom. I want to be able to see the beauty of either SRT or some other higher bandwidth, even this Video Ninja, where we can actually see the full color fidelity of what, you know, a 6K or a 12K camera, or we just became a red dealer of what a red camera quality looks like. And so I'm trying, it just keeps coming through my mind of like, yeah, how do we, like I have the behind me, you can't really see it because I'm framed. Oh yeah, you can see it. This is the world's first Dante camera. So video, this is HDMI over Dante, and it's the world's first one. And then it has a cool controller, looks like this, with a joystick. So, you know, I can see it moving behind me.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and the video is flying over Dante. Yeah, so that could be flying around hundreds of feet away or thousands of feet away over IP. But yeah, I want people to be able to log into a web page and control that camera and then look at it side by side with a Panasonic, a Bird Dog, a Lumens. And to me, that's part of the future, and why I love participating in office hours is because there's people out there that are giving me ideas, which they're using it for Belfast method, but I want to use it for, you know, a virtual showroom. And so like, as I see these things, it's like my eyes light up and my brain starts going in a different direction than anybody would use it for video production. I want to use it for retail. So some of this stuff could change the way that not only trade shows are done, because who knows if we're going to see another IBC or NAB or Infocom. I would love to be able to let people virtually attend these. And although you can't physically push the button, if you still get that same kind of experience with a button that you push and you see something move on the other side, it's pretty cool. The first time you see something move when you touch it on your screen, like one time we had Mickey in the Philippines controlling that at a Panasonic PTZ. It was a pretty big aha moment. It's because it's almost real time. You know, it's like milliseconds, like 200 milliseconds, not even that. So when he pushes it, it's changing. It's manipulating things from the other side of the world it's pretty wild.
Okay, so real quickly, tell us what Dante is, and then tell us the cameras that you mentioned, PTZ and et cetera.
Sure. So Dante is traditionally an audio protocol. So it's a transport mechanism of bringing multi-channels of audio around a facility. So typically you would take, I don't have one, it's in my other room, but it's basically to get started, $100 box that has a chip inside of it that takes XLR and converts it to Ethernet. So you would take, you know, it's basically taking professional microphone or a mixer and then allowing it to be transported around. So instead of, in the olden days, we had these big, heavy, what we called snakes, big, like 16 channels of audio would be 16 XLR cables, and it would be a thick snake of all these bundled together. And we'd have to run that from what we call the front of the house to the back of the house. And now you can do it over one little Ethernet cable, one standard just that everybody has. So Dante is a way of transporting multiple channels of audio digitally instead of analog copper. You're using digital over Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat 7. And this brand is new. Well, it's not new, but this is the world's first Dante-enabled camera. The manufacturer is called Bolin. Bolin also does Bird Dogs cameras, so they're no stranger to this market. They're just not embracing NDI. They're embracing Dante instead. And I mean, NDI is already out there everywhere. That's a whole nother conversation. But they're mostly SDI cameras. So this one has actually this one just has HDMI. A lot of the other brands, Panasonic, PTZ Optics, Lumens, they all have SDI and HDMI, so you can hook them up into a switcher. And I love them because for COVID, you think about it, you don't have to have a camera operator that's, you know, breathing in the same space, especially close to the talent. You can have these things nearby, and then they're not, it's not intimidating, you know, to have this thing moving around because they're really quiet. Like the motor is super silent. And so you barely notice that they're there. And especially if you're getting overhead shots in like a cooking show or a stage performance, you don't have to have somebody up in the rafters. You can just, we call them robocams. You can just robocam the thing, and one controller can control 200 cameras. So you could have a lot of these things. Yeah, you just push a button and just punch in the number that you want. So a lot of people just lock them off. They just get the shot that they want, guitarist, drummer. But sometimes you do it, the people move on the stage and you have to follow them. So the good ones, you can actually really get good at tracking people. And Panasonic and Bird Dog even have AI now, auto tracking. So a robot, a piece of software can control what a person's eyes and head look like and follow that body, that shape, and it knows if somebody turns their head to write on a blackboard. It's fascinating stuff that the technology is getting that evolved, where it even knows if somebody's wearing a mask. So they updated the software recently because a lot of instructors were wearing masks and it would throw off the AI. And now the latest update, it recognizes that and it can still track. And then you actually program it who's who. So if a student walks by, it doesn't latch onto the student. It'll keep locked on the instructor. So it's really fascinating stuff. So the world's evolving in that regard too. Our friend Jeff Keithley showed a video of a robotic head by Mark Roberts, which will track a tennis ball. And I mean, he's not using these traditional, well, he's using these too, but he's also using just the heads that'll take any camera. So you put the camera and it's just the head that moves around. So it's panning and tilting, and then the head you can put like a full-size broadcast camera on this thing. And he's doing this with big tennis shows that are going out, across the world. And it's fascinating to see that an AI-enabled device can track it better than a human. So it's kind of scary in some ways, because I was a camera operator for a while. I wouldn't say a long time, but I did a couple of shoots. There's probably some pictures of one of the guys. I want to pull up some of my crazy shots. There's one of the gorge of the big, actually that one's just Mad in the Kitchen, but there's one of a concert scene that's it's pretty cool. So I've operated some pretty large cameras for events in the past, and it's weird to think that a computer could take over what I used to do, because that was long, hard work, just following around drummers. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you, Guy, for sharing that. What do you want video production professionals to know about what you are doing with office hours?
Well, I'm fascinated by where we're going with this. I know we're just barely starting to do office hours 2.0, but my head's already in 3.0. Like 3.0 is going to the cloud, and my brain's already there, like going, hey, video production professionals, like we're headed to the cloud. Whether I have to drag you kicking and screaming, we're going there. Like it's going to get cheaper, it's going to get faster. You're just not going to do it locally. It really hit me when I was at CES 2 years ago, and I was in the Intel booth, and a gentleman was talking to another attendee. In the future, that gaming consoles will just be like little boxes that are like in the olden days in the 80s, we had these workstations which were attached to a central mainframe. I can't remember what you call them, but they were, do you remember what they call those? Not telnet, something. Do you remember we had like computers that were just like dumb terminals? They just had no brain in them. They were just like a monitor and a keyboard. Anyways, that's where we're going in the future with cloud, is all the processing power doesn't have to live in your house, with all the power consumption and all the crazy, expense. Because what happens with technology often is that you don't use the latest and greatest, fastest thing enough to justify owning it. Like some people like my dad has this crazy fast, his laptop is fast. It was like $3,000. It's faster than my vMix workstation, and he's just playing Flight Simulator. So, I mean, I don't blame him. He needs some heavy horsepower, but he doesn't utilize it all the time like a video production professional would. So I love the fact that in the future, a lot of this stuff's going to get cheaper. TVU Networks is one of the companies to look at. They have a wonderful app already that's running in the cloud. That's what I had envisioned. When I saw Jeff Keithley's thing, I wanted to do something like what TVU Networks, there's a demo that you can download. TVU Networks has a cloud switching software that's pretty polished. Like they were ahead of the game by far. So I would suggest taking a look at that. But what I want to see video production professionals turn into is just getting better at switching graphics, being able to toss video routed around either facilities or from place to place, get good on comms, being able to call shows, being able to talk to each other, and then hosting. I mean, you're seeing it yourself. You've gotten so much better, Tony, with being able to, maintain the conversation. You got people behind the scenes monitoring and doing things for you, and you and I can just sit here and being a panelist on office hours has taught me that. Like, you don't see me, like, I could go switch to, there was a picture I wanted to, but I would be distracted, and it would, even those few seconds of me fumbling around can make viewer attention drop. So, being aware of these things of what makes a good show. So I love seeing that as we evolve office hours, that people are just getting a taste of this and they're getting better and better. Like Brian, who you had on last week. I mean, he's a school teacher and now he's cutting shows and he's getting fast at it and he's getting good at it. And so I think all of us are getting faster and better, and we're able to see who's who and who's getting good at what, who has a passion to do what. So some people might be really good at graphics. Some people might not want to be a host, but they're really good at show calling from behind the scenes. So love seeing Talaluk jamming behind the scenes, just calling these shots. I mean, for those of you that are watching that haven't had a chance to jump into after hours and listen, so oftentimes we'll have this show behind the scenes, and you can actually hear Aaron or Manolo calling the shots, and you can say like, give me the 2-up, go back to the single, fade over, get that photo. He's asking for the shot of the crowd, go for the crowd shot, boom, 3, 2, take. And so it's fun to see all this technology that used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in a broadcast truck, and we didn't have access to it. Like there was this, regime, the old guard that didn't let us go into CNN and play with this stuff. And now you can just go to Costco, go get a laptop or a Mac Mini, and you're off to the races. So it's fascinating to me to see all this evolution.
Fantastic to be in this space at this time.
It really is.
Yeah. So we have a question, and this question is, what did you learn from your work in Mad in the Kitchen? And then before you do that, just tell us what Mad in the Kitchen is.
Mad in the Kitchen was a show with Madeline Smithberg and Sky Gleason. He was the producer / camera. He was everything, actually. And it evolved from, like you, Tony, a simple iPhone, and they were using StreamYard at first. But the content started getting good, and they started getting on broadcast shows. So they were invited to, like, Jenna and what's the other? Jenna and it was the morning,
11,
whatever.
11, what is it? NBC... Today's Show was
I believe that's
that's Jenna and them, right?
Yep. And so as we started to see in office hours, Sky showing that he was on these big shows, we had this idea like, hey, we want to do like super sources. We have this idea of bringing in a remote guest. And I think Alex really wanted to test his systems as well. So we, as a crew, just decided to do a lot of this stuff for free. And I didn't really want much to do with it at the beginning. I was like, maybe I'll help a little. But when I heard the tone of JJ's voice when he's like, he really needs help, and like it rattled me, because I was like, oh man, I don't want him to like, go down in flames. Like, I don't want this show to be, a bad mark, not just on Seattle or Sky or anything. I don't like people failing. So I wanted to help them. And originally it was like, I'm just going to do a few things. And I originally didn't want to do it unless there was a professional audio person, because to me, audio is very difficult. And if at that level, when you're doing, shows of hundreds of viewers, audio is the number one thing. So you really, if you can't afford it, get an audio guy, because they'll just solve that problem. I mean, they've got years of experience. They got all the gear. Some of the gear, like guys that I know, they're walking in with $40,000 to $80,000 in sound equipment. I mean, it's bananas. Like you're like, because they have 2 or 3 of everything, wireless mics. They got in-ear monitors, Comtex. They've got big fader controls. They've got the ability to do almost a video village, so people can watch or see what's going on. It's it's pretty fascinating what you can do with high quality sound. So anyways, I got to the set and I was like, these lights are horrible. Like, but I understood it was low budget, so I have something called a spectrometer, and since I sell lights and I actually helped design some lights, I bought a spectrometer, which is like $1,200 piece of equipment. And I've looked at so many lights that I could just tell immediately if it's got a green cast, magenta cast. I can see it. And so when I looked at the lights, I'm like, oh God, this isn't going to make food look good. It's not going to make her skin tones look good. So I was like, I should really bring in some lights. So the first week I just kind of hung back and offered a second camera and got a couple shots to liven up the show. But then it just evolved. By this episode 8, I was bringing like $50,000 worth of stuff. I had the Fujinon lens, the Cabrio, though it's like, this monster lens, that you see in that picture. The only thing I didn't have was a really good tripod. And that was one of the things that I really took away was if you want to shoot, so I'm used to when I do these big rock shows and things, we're using Socklers and Cartonis, and it's the best of the best. And so when you do a move, like I could steer these things with my pinky, and it looks gorgeous. Big cameras, huge 20, 30 pound cameras I can steer with a pinky because the head is totally balanced. So when you have the right gear, it makes you just look great. And so there was a couple shots that I just blew when I was like, oh my God, this head, I need to get a new head. And I wanted to, but it just wasn't my show. It wasn't my budget. I couldn't go asking management like, hey, I need to go buy this, $5,000 Cartoni for a show that's not even mine, because we were already doing a lot for that show just out of the goodness of our hearts. So we wound up doing eight episodes. It was a pretty heavy lift for me personally. Eight Saturdays during the spring to summer. I gave up a lot to do that show, but I'm glad that I did. I wish I would have seen that show, elevate to season 2 and have, either get picked up by Bravo. I thought something was going to happen with it. I'm not sure where it's at now. I know Sky's doing a lot of other production and whatnot, but still, I learned a lot. And I also learned that one of the things that really hit me, there was more people in the Zoom call afterwards or during the show watching how the production was made than viewing the actual show. So that was an aha moment to me, was that people really, really want to learn this stuff. They really want to know what's going on. Like, where's the switcher located? Where's the camera positioned? How's the talent reading the teleprompter? Where's that light at? It was very fascinating. So we put a PTZ camera. So DVE Store has that Zoom room capability where you can have others do what's called a request camera control, and you can move one of those PTZ type cameras from what they call far end control. So you can just say request camera control and you can take over the camera. So we had people in that Zoom call that were zooming into the teleprompter to see, is that an iPad? Is that a field rolled monitor? What's he got in there? And how small is it? And what audio is she using? And so you could zoom into her ear. You could see that she was using the Bubble Bees. At first she was using AirPods, and then one dropped into the food in one episode. So
Wow.
That's when we decided, actually, thanks to the generosity of not me, but another Office Hours member, somebody ponied up a few bucks and bought her some Bubble Bees, or bought, I should say, Office Hours of Bubble Bees. So those are still in the community if anybody ever needs to use them. They're a gift to the so it's not just me that's generous in this community. There's a few others that when they see a need, they're willing to help out. And we'll see as the show evolves as to as a nonprofit, we'll see where we can go with being able to get other pieces of gear like that. I'm excited for that, to see like if somebody needed a PTZ or an SRT encoder or a good mic for a shoot or a 12K, maybe one day, maybe there'll be an Office Hours 12K in the pool where anybody can just be like, yeah, I need that for the weekend. Where do I click to sign up? Maybe.
Very cool. Very cool. We have a question from Germany from Jonas de Tel. What surprised you the most with Office Hours?
I don't know if it was like that big a deal to a lot of people, but hearing the behind the scenes of how there was like these insert studios, it was one of the episodes that I missed, but when we started learning about LTN, the switch, and it was kind of an aha moment as to how people have been doing these, guests have been doing these remotes. So basically, if you wanted to be on CNN and you didn't want to have to fly to Washington, D.C. or wherever they're producing that, you would just look at their list of insert studios and you would drop in there, and they would have the camera set up, and they have this fiber service that's a direct connect back to the studio. So it was just really surprising that that's how it all worked, because I had no idea. I hadn't been in that space, so it was enlightening, not only just because of the technical reasons, but things just started going off in my head as to how can we do this? How can we do this ourselves, and how can we have like a Kinko's or a library? Because there's something that we invented that DVE Store sells called the One Button Studio. So I was fascinated by the fact that we're doing something similar and they're doing something similar, but I'm trying to figure out how to merge the two together, because traditionally we put these things in universities and they go in the library and kids come in and they can record their episodes. But now it's like, how do they go live? And so it was a surprise to me. It was like a light bulb went off of like, we're onto something. I just don't know how to bridge the two together yet, because we were just running Mimo Live on it. And so we started installing Zoom as an option, and we're still figuring it out, but it's a surprise and fun. It's what makes my brain. It's not just me. I really got to hand it to my coworker, Jason Jenkins, who's the brainchild behind that. It's a pretty crazy setup that he's got a new Panasonic BGH1, some crazy F-Sorb panels, and it's like now turning into a $40,000 kit that we ship on a pallet, and it sets up within minutes. It's pretty cool to see how the whole thing can just, you can get a studio shipped to you for 40 grand. That's super high quality. So
wow,
something fun.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So we have Roscoe Jones again. How did having children change you?
That's a good question. I was so young when I had my first one. I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this, but, I wasn't the best father at 18 years old. I still wanted to go to college and do my own thing. So I didn't have much of a change. Actually, no, I take that back. That's what wanted me to get to college, was I knew that I had somebody, I looked at those eyes and I knew that I better make some money. I can just go, partying with my friends anymore. I had to buckle up. So I decided to dig deep. I mean, I had 2 jobs and I was taking a full load of credits at the college. So I was telling somebody the other night about that, and they were like, "What? You had 2 jobs and one was in Seattle, which was 2 hours away?" It's like, yeah, that's what I did, and I was exhausted to where I would just like sleep all weekend because I worked during the week so many hours and commuted back and forth. It was bananas. But then I'd say that more so the one that changed me is, so I adopted a child, and this might be too much information, but I adopted a child a couple of years ago, and it came out as initially, hey, can you watch this kid for 2 weeks? And she was a 2-day-old baby, and 2 weeks turned into, well, she's 8 now. So you guys have probably seen her, some of you that, oh yeah, there's the picture. So there's Chloe on adoption day. We wound up getting her adopted after she was age 4 in that picture, but that's our family there. And so having kids has changed me a lot by looking at the world through their eyes and wondering, like, what's the future and what is, getting your hand burned on the stove mean. So I let my kids kind of have little, I wouldn't say setup accidents, but I let them go ahead and feel the stove, so Chloe and I cook cookies and muffins and croissants and things like that. And I let her accidentally drop the eggshells in the egg and have to get it out herself, or, it's little things where I consider it a pretty safe environment compared to the rest of the world. I don't let her get cut with knives or things like that, but it's been really not only empowering, but just a really just heartwarming feeling when you help a kid that's not even yours. I mean, back to that story of do something for somebody that can't do anything for you, and maybe she will. I mean, she's actually taught me patience and things like that. So I would say, and being humble. I mean, she's taught me a lot. So yeah, having kids is definitely changes you.
Amazing question. Thank you so much for that, Roscoe. Dr. Chris Clark, Tempe, Arizona. Guy, please talk a bit about your experience as Sunday school teacher teaching remotely.
Oh, great question, Chris. It's funny because when I was an instructor teaching Final Cut, I was teaching at universities and people were paying $695 for me to go teach these classes, to attend these classes. So I was teaching people with like dual PhDs that worked at NASA. Like those are the kind of people that were in my class. And it was easy to teach them because I knew my subject inside and out. So Chris, I'm still learning a lot about the Bible and about religion. So I know there's not a whole lot about politics and religion on office hours, but I help broadcast our local Sunday services, and I enjoy doing it. It's my use of my talents to be able to give back. But being able to teach kids, I'm still nervous as all get out teaching little 7 and 8-year-olds because I don't know it as much. And so I think being able to rehearse and really know your stuff inside and out is what's made me a great teacher in the past. So I wish that I had more time to just dive in, and because the lessons aren't it's across the board, like they're handed to you. So it's like we're doing this weekend, this weekend. So it's already planned out. So you gotta, and the couple times that I've had to do it, it was like last minute because somebody was sick. And so, but I love being able to teach remotely because you can just, be in the comfort of your own home and not have to be around, especially as COVID at that time was raging on. It was really nice to just not have to worry about somebody breathing on you, especially kids really, they're highly transmissible, we'll put it that way. They don't always have their mask over their nose all the way. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, for that question. Joe Floyd from Gainesville, Florida. What are the best places for hands-on learning beyond church and public access channels?
I would say to find your local video production folks and see if they'll let you come on a gig, because there's a lot of stuff where people just need a PA, they need an extra helping hand. But yeah, I've found that churches have been the best. Public access, I'm not too sure about. At least not in this area, but locally we have a group called Production Peeps. So if you talk to people, you can find where these Facebook groups are, and then you could find where locally we had one called Sessions in Place. It's similar to the Belfast method where it wasn't remote, it was actually on site. Although now that gives me another idea. I could probably help those guys turn that we could help Belfast Sessions in Place. But basically, it was a place where on Production Peeps, a Facebook group, that people said, hey, anybody that wants to help, come to this venue. We're still going to do COVID checks and all that. We're still going to have the COVID police on site, but we'll give people an opportunity to run the slider. So they had a moving camera that would go back and forth. And sometimes just seeing this stuff, because it gives you ideas for other productions or what gear you really want to buy or what's junk and what's good. So sometimes you can get on these sets and you see what the good lights are, what the good audio systems are. And then you just learn stuff like how to wind a cable up, how to use gaff tape, how to treat people, of catering. There is a pecking order a lot of times on set, and it's nice to get around people that will allow you to experience that. So yeah, and for those of you that are listening that are in that position of able to take people on, like, let these guys come on, like, let them watch. And I think that there is a dream of putting some of these PTZ cameras behind the scenes on more places as things open up more, so that people can watch behind the scenes and see how to do this stuff and learn without having to travel. Because sometimes it's just not available. Like the public access thing in LA, there was public access that was easily accessible. You just booked your time slot. You could waltz right in. Here, I haven't seen too much of that, at least not that I'm even aware of at all, actually, of people going into the local stations.
Yeah, and I want to, as you said that, I want to lift up Conversation with Tony Mobley is a very interesting production, and there are opportunities to participate in Conversations with Tony Mobley. So I wanted to make sure that those of you who are listening and want a new challenge, you can participate in the back end of Conversation with Tony Mobley. So I just wanted to share that. Greg Gibson is back, and he says, what is it like running a global retail empire? What's your day-to-day like at the office, and how do you balance home and office demands?
don't know about a global empire. I mean, we go head to heads with some big corporations, but a lot of it's handled actually by the managers. So we've set it up. We have 17 people. We have 3 managers, and a lot of them just focus on their thing. So I let them run the show. I do meet with them, and then I have one-on-ones with each manager, and then with the sales team. That one's a group meeting. So a lot of it's just meetings. So I'll meet with people via Zoom. I don't go into the office that often. Balancing home and office, I try to get my exercise stuff done in the morning. I try to do more like the 9 to 5, but traditionally I wind up going into the evening. I'm not the best at balance, but I definitely now dedicate Saturdays to the kids, Sundays to church and the kids. So before I used to be a 7-day-a-week guy, and now I'm learning that this is not super sustainable. So I'm getting back into hanging with the family.
Yeah, we ran out of time, Guy. Because the show is a global operation, we have to end in about 30 seconds. And so we ran out of time. And so I just want to say to those people whose questions did not get asked and answered, apologies. It just means that we probably have to have Guy come back. So the last question is, you're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know?
Be humble and lift your fellow man.
Thank you, Guy Cochran, so much for being here with me tonight. Thank you for being a video production scientist who figured things out and helped people along the way. Thank you, sir. I want to give special thanks to Kimberly Mobley, Ron Mobley, the Global Family and Friends, Alex Lindsay, Office Hour members, DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Byte Hive, Video 360, ApprovedForLoan.com, Cloud Bedrock LLC, Ken Jordan, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Huslich, Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Bo Cordell, Mickey Makachor, Hasmukh Gaijar, Dr. Hasmukh Gaijar, Doug Moeller, Laura Thompson, Bryant Shan, Dennis Champion Walker, Roscoe Jones, George Butters, Conversation with Tony Mobley producer, Clylock Lopez Waterman. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. And I want to say to Mr. Guy Cochran, video production professional and video production scientist, thank you for the great work. Next week, we're going to have Mr. Ricardo Hicks, CEO of Tech Factory, a North Carolina video production company. Please join us next week for that great conversation. And we have other educators, mental health professionals, filmmakers, musicians, and other creators. We are having interesting conversations with interesting people. Please, if you have an opportunity, like and subscribe. Conversations with Tony Mobley. Thank you all so much, and good night. Thanks again, Guy Cochran.